This is Blacklisted Radio. It's the 11th day of October, 2014. My name is Doug Owen. I am the senior editor of BlacklistedNews.com and your host. You can join me live Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time at BlacklistedRadio.com along with the crew hanging out there. Want to say hello to them? All right. So you can also follow the show on Twitter at BLN Radio. That's the handle for it and everything that you need to be part of it, including our YouTube channel. People want us to highlight that Spreaker sucks. Sometimes it does. That's what we used to stream out the live show and host the archives. And the live stream aspect of it is sometimes suspect. So, we put everything on YouTube. It's a popular platform, and it's going to be one of those that I think is going to be very accessible to many people as long as the powers that be and Google allow it to be. So, that's one of the things about centralized services and trying to make this show as multi-platformed as possible is that you risk being held at the mercy of one of these platforms. So I see a lot of focus being put on putting things out there, on building Facebook pages and building your Twitter followers. And at the end of the day, that stuff is just so temporary. Some of the other things that are pretty temporary we'll be talking about, and that's crises. We have temporary crisis everywhere, unimaginable crisis. The rhetoric of the week is beyond the pale. I mean, I've got articles where Ebola is being blamed on global warming. We knew that was coming, of course. The NRA, the NRA, just about any boogeyman. Racism is another topic that is getting a lot of focus, considering some of the things happening in Ferguson, Missouri. Racism is alive and well in a lot of places, and we highlighted one of those in Israel, where there has been rampant anti-Semitism not anti-Semitism, because that would be anti-Jewish, but actually Semites being anti-black, anti-immigrant, xenophobic. That kind of racism is okay. If you look at a lot of the hypocrisy in the human rights of the councils and of these organizations that purport to be for the human rights of all people, all global citizens. Pretty shocking stuff that you see happening in places like Saudi Arabia. And we're going to talk about Saudi Arabia because there's some interesting tie-ins into the latest. But before we get to all of that, I want to say that one of the reasons that we did not do Doomcast as of yet this week, a lot of you have been texting, have been asking what has happened. Charlie McGrath, the host of Doomcast, a podcast that I do with him each and every week, has been in the hospital. So all of your well wishes are well received. And for you out there, just to kind of explain why we haven't done the show yet, it's because Charlie has been in. It's no secret that he's had asthma and he's had health problems, most of which we can attribute to the Gulf War funk, the illness from being exposed to really God only knows what, and something that just happened later in his life, and now battling with asthma. He's been in the hospital for 3 days. So all the best to Charlie. I do have word that he is out. So at some point during this weekend, we plan on doing the Doomcast. So it'll be a double header this weekend. This show may be a few minutes short, but for all of you out there that do support us financially, I feel very obligated to not only the listeners of the show, but those that commute and use this as an informational tool to an entertainment tool for their travels. So sorry about this week. Lots more content will be put out in the very near future. Trying to do a lot more with, one of the things that's so scarce, more scarce than gold and fiat currencies and, rare minerals and fine gems is time. So, okay, let's talk about some of the things that are happening around the world, one of which is very enigmatic to me. I'm really interested to find out what's happening in North Korea. some of you may have noted there has been some coverage of the fact that Kim Jong Un is, he's gone. Nobody knows where he has been. He hasn't been seen since early September, and the last time we have any visual confirmation of his being alive is this video where he is limping, obviously limping. So the speculation and the analysis from some pretty interesting groups of people that might know have come to bear, including Vice, which I'll just be honest. I mean, the first thing that hit me when I thought Vice News, I'm talking about Shane Smith's organization, this huge media syndicate, probably the most powerful and financially enriched media, print or online journalism that you're going to find. I mean, I don't know if there's anything bigger than Vice, really. I mean, you could say CNN or NBC. I mean, yeah, they got a lot of penetration into, the market for, over-air TV and the like. But, I mean, they are very powerful and very influential. Well, anyway, Dennis Rodman and the Vice crew went to North Korea, into the Hermetic Kingdom. I guess it was about 2 years ago. I mean, the documentary of them going over there and trying to use basketball. And don't think that the State Department wasn't involved with this. Heavily involved, so much so that I think they put too much pressure on Dennis Rodman. He broke down. I'm not going to play the clip, but he was freaking out and basically going on a drunken tirade on one of the, I think it was MSNBC shows. Anyway, so the first thing that came to mind, I'll be honest, is that the Vice guys poisoned Kim Jong Un when he was there, that they, assassinated him, or some other variation. I mean, the first thing you think is, okay, they use this as a way to start a dialogue so they could assassinate this guy. I don't know if that's the case, but it's the first thing that I thought of because I am pretty skeptical. This comes from Vice. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un has not been seen in public since September 3rd, and today, for the first time, he did not take part in the annual commemoration of the foundation of the Korean Workers' Party. So, meanwhile, on October 3rd, 3 of the highest-ranking officials in the country made a surprise visit to the closing ceremony of the 2014 Asian Games in Incheon, South Korea, when they agreed with senior South Koreans to resume the inter-Korean dialogue that has been suspended for years. And this is about the reunification of North and South Korea. And I think that it's important because there's been a lot of focus by Western media on bringing these countries together. They're the only country in the world that has not become part of some system, that is completely isolated. And it's an untapped treasure that they have because of the limited amount of extraction and resources that have been pretty much kept almost pure. You're not going to find that almost anywhere else in the world. So the untapped resources, oil reserves, you name it, that it's under North Korea. I've seen some of the estimates, take them for what they were or what they are, and they're always estimates. Billions of dollars, billions of barrels worth of oil, just a trove of different mineral resources. So cracking that nut is going to be something that the power elite, as well as the Fortune 500s, would love to do. I mean, it's a new, huge market to exploit. Anyway, so it is strange that we haven't seen Kim Jong Un and the senior party, the underlying power brokers in North Korea, are now making pilgrimages to the South Korean side to work out a deal. And, what this may bear, what this might birth would be, just a huge amount of money and power and resources. And The fact that they have been able to isolate themselves has been pretty amazing. I mean, the horrors that we hear about what is happening in North Korea, having the cult of personality, having to worship the man gods, this all out of, the Soviet era. This is, Stalin's little project, of course, with Kim Jong Il's father. But anyway, it's pretty interesting because it's definitely a different take on what's happening now, and rather than beating the North Koreans or trying to fight the North Koreans, it seems like they want to expand and to tap this huge labor and resource pool that is North Korea. So that is happening in the background. Not a lot of coverage on it, so that's why I find it so interesting. Let's see. We are streaming. Okay, good. Just looking over here. I always wonder if this thing's half working. That kind of distracts me sometimes. All right, so we talked about Dennis Rodman. They probably assassinated him. That's what I think. That's probably something that is underway. We'll find out. And I always have thought, and many others have as well, I mean, that when you have, this is pretty much case in point for any dictatorship, is that the dictator is usually just a front person for the backbone, the actual shadow government that is behind the apparatus, the CEOs of these different, in China, the different, huge multinational corporations and sovereign funds and the like that back them. In North Korea, it's completely different. It's really just a family hierarchy that has been built, and bringing in, I'm sure, some of the smarter and more powerful and influential generals. But you have to have a power sharing. So there's no way for one person to really control and micromanage in such a in-depth way to indoctrinate and basically enslave the North Korean people. So you need a lot of other middle management, and middle management is usually where the decisions are made. So just to kind of summate there's definitely people that are more powerful than Kim Jong Un in his government. All right, so speaking of untapped treasures and places that we would love to visit, I do. They're the wilderness. One of the few places you can get away from the technocracy and the day-to-day inundation of technology and just being constantly confronted with tons of tasks and just all of the stuff that goes into your day-to-day life. Multitasking your mind into gray matter, all of those things. You can get away, you can go to the wilderness, you can go to some of these national parks. I saw this headline, it just kind of highlighted in my mind where we're going, or really how far we have come from an economic freedom-loving giant to basically a big scam. We're living in a Barker society where your government is trying to create value and wealth out of just about anything rather than looking at the truth, and that is that there is no economic engine that is powerful enough to create lots of employment into the future. And there's several reasons, not just government sucking, but automation, robots replacing people, automation and algorithmic trading has really taken away the human aspect of Wall Street and the trading floor. Mostly that's just a TV set. Anyway, I know I'm going off on a tangent here. I saw this article, most of you probably have as well, from Oregon Live, highlighting that it's going to cost you, the U.S. government wants you to pay $1,500 to take a photo in a federal wilderness area. So the wilderness area, I say wilderness area, if I can speak here, those areas under federal control, are vast and wide. I think almost 1/3. Don't quote me on this, but there is a lot of acreage, tens of thousands of acres, safely we can say, that are under federal control. And these are places that you would love to take a picture of if you go and visit, if the federal government will allow you to come and see the natural beauty and resources that it has taken from the private individuals that have relinquished it for one reason or another to the government. And sometimes the government does a better job. I mean, I am an anarcho-capitalist at heart. I say this all the time. I mean, I love that in a vacuum, but you cannot keep people from trying to exploit resources to survive. I mean, that's one of the things that we have to fight day to day, is the human nature of us. Okay, every day your primal instincts tell you that you should go out and mate with new people and make hundreds of babies and forage, all of the things that that are our animal instincts. We as human beings have the advantage or disadvantage of, and that is to be able to make conscious decisions that are moral and probably better on a lot of other for a social level, rather than on a primal level. You needing to go out there and have sex with everything that moves, if you were trying to survive and propagate the human race as a caveman or cave woman, the world's different than it is today. There's a social aspect to all of this and being able to make those decisions, because it's probably better to fall in love with somebody and have an intimate relationship that will bud into something that's much larger, and to have that kind of that true equilibrium and that partnership. That's much more important than having sex with everything out there. And in today's climate, I can only imagine you have to deal with things like super gonorrhea and who knows what, and just the worry of that. All of you out there dating today on the internet through all of the different mediums of the day, I can only imagine. It's probably easier, but it's a different animal altogether. Makes me feel very, very old. Nonetheless, when you're out there fulfilling your primal urges to go back to nature, the appeal to nature, there's the government wanting to tap you for taking a photo with your iPhone. Lovely sunset against the Sierra Mountains, $1,500. And it reminds me of what is happening in Europe, and that is where the numbers are so bad. The economy is in such dire straits that the only way to highlight what's left that has always been there is the black market. Now they are counting prostitution. I mean, at some point they're going to have, criminal manipulation, all of the other things, all of the other scams that have become profitable as part of the GDP. It's ridiculous that prostitution, illicit drug sales are now somehow part of the economy. Now, it is true; it does have a huge effect on the economy, and you're seeing that in the United States, where they've legalized the cultivation and selling of cannabis. Even before it was legal, we saw the huge rise of places like in British Columbia, where illicit drug trade in cannabis has really built economies. The cocaine built Miami. Watch the Cocaine Cowboy documentary, and you'll see how most of what you have today was built around illicit drug markets. Chicago, you could put a lot of that huge industrial growth and the local economy to prohibition. If you go back and look at during those times, the amount of economic expansionism and how affluent people became because of those things. But that shouldn't be something that you base the economy off of, or that you highlight as, I don't know, progress as an indicator that things are going better? And how bleak has it become where you look at something like, okay, well, the money that we have coming in is from drugs and prostitution and other, less than virtuous conduits or less than virtuous avenues. Is that better? Or is that a way to highlight what's good? So you look at these numbers, they're wonderful. Yeah, but that's, cocaine and hookers. That's what you're basing all of that off of. Anyway, this is just, ridiculous, and it highlights this hubris that the federal government is, that even has the right. I mean, this is federal land. This is the people's land. The government is supposed to be a custodian of this land for who? For the people, not for the government. The government doesn't need the land. It's just a bureaucracy. It's just a system. It doesn't need to fulfill itself. It doesn't have an identity. It's not a person. It doesn't need to hold things. It only does that in the public's trust. I could read you all of the justifications and reasoning behind having federal lands and how the Federal Land Bureau and all of these other institutions or agencies are supposed to hold this in public trust. Read it at your leisure if you want to, but basically that's the whole reason that the government has these powers to control these lands is for you. And so when you visit them and you want to take a freaking picture and they want to charge you $1,500, you realize how much the government has, people in it have used this now as a way to, they believe that they own it and that it's going to be a tool to extract more wealth out of your pockets, as if your taxes, as if your servitude and all of the other things that you do for this country, okay? and maybe it's because you're selling drugs and you're running prostitution. Maybe it's because or sex workers. I'm sorry. Let's not go after those people. It's not to attack the people themselves, but that, if that's what the government should be going after and taxing, and what they're highlighting is so virtuous, then worry about that more and less about people and what they're doing with their iPhones on federal lands. It's just, I think, a perfect example, a perfect metaphor for where we're at, where the government has now become this living creature that believes it has complete ownership of you and the land. It doesn't own the land. It's just a custodian. It's like the police don't own your streets. They're just there to protect them. They don't put down the asphalt. It's usually the city. All right, so this thing kind of ground my gears this week. I'm sure some of you others saw this and were pretty pissed off. It illustrates the stupidity and the disregard for the citizenry. That's really what it is. It's a disregard for you. Oh, well, you might sell this picture and do something for yourself, and the government has to tax that to death. And it's like those guys that every once in a while catch that 1,000th home run from the big superstar of the era, baseball player. And before they've sold it, before there's anything that has exchanged, the government's already there with their hands out trying to figure out how much money you owe them just for owning this, just for catching a ball. And you're like, wow, really? That's the same thing, okay? There is no value or perceived value. What if I don't sell this picture? What if it has only personal value to me? Oh, well, and here's the other thing. If you do sell the picture, they're going to tax the shit out of you anyway for selling that picture and making some kind of capital gain. If you're selling it for any amount of money, more than $600, you're going to have to get 1099 or pay some fee to the government. No doubt about it. And the money that you make, you'll probably use to buy something that has tons of other taxes assessed to it. Whether it's gas for your car, you're paying tax. Whether you buy food, you're paying a ton of taxes. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So it's like it's never enough. They just can't get you down far enough with your pants over your ankles. And I mean, now we're at the point where they're just pushing you in the mud. It's unacceptable. It really is. It's just so infuriating when you see these examples. I mean, there's no money being transferred. Nobody's made anything, but they're already there. And that shows you where we're at because they're so desperate to rip you off. And that's what we have. We have this barker economy. Hey, kids, come on through. The only thing that's valuable to these days and what they're creating derivatives off of are really complicated contracts that, average people like you and I listening and hosting this podcast can't really understand. There's so many different gotchas. You look at a derivative, it's basically a high stakes put option gamble on something going up, down, or left or right, sideways, horizontally, vertically. It goes one way or the other, and somebody's losing money and somebody's winning. And it's just a big complicated bet. It's like a triple parlay on a basketball game, except probably more arbitrary and less entertaining. Are cottonseed oil futures going up 2%? If they do, then this insurance company will pay you because we've insured the loss and the risk. And this is all under the guise of mitigating risk, and basically it's just mitigated your ability to know what the hell they're doing with money. But it's a big illusionary scam. That's what it becomes. I mean, it's part of this barker system. I mean, here's a good example of waste and complete impunity from the law. An unnamed senior figure from a UK bank is the first person in Britain to plead guilty over the manipulation of the interbank rate. You don't need to know what the interbank rate is, but there's a bunch of guys in a dark, shadowy room that come up with the interbank rate, and it's called Libor. You may have heard of Libor. It was a $350 trillion scandal with derivatives. Now, you think about this for a moment. Okay, $350 trillion. Unfathomable. I know. I mean, how many $100 bills would that be? Would it be a neighborhood full of money? Would it be a city full of money where we just live on this paper island? What would it look like? You can't even imagine what it would look like. We can only just say that this is a unimaginable amount of money. Well, anyway, the manipulation of $350 trillion worth of alleged value, these derivatives, would be a big deal. I mean, you can go to jail. Grand larceny, I think, is anything over $1,000. It might be lower than that or a little bit higher, but it's a big deal. You write a hot check. Here's a perfect example. Go and write a hot check and see what happens to you for $50, maybe even something more arbitrary. Go write a hot check to a convenience store, even if you can. Number one, if you can find somebody that will take a check these days, I mean, that's probably something yesteryear. But you write a check that is fake, that has no backing, that has no backing. It's called fraud. If you go across a state boundary, if you go across the state line, that could be interstate or intrastate organized crime. There's a lot of things they could charge you with. My point being is that you could do a lot of time for something so trivial, $50, and something that has almost minimal impact on everyone involved. Okay, I mean, even if you get scammed for $50, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to probably make or break you in a lifetime. Inconvenient to lose $50. Worth probably, for some people in the United States, a day's worth of work. In other places, maybe a week or a month or a quarter. But $350 trillion is a lot of money. Now, I don't know if you've ever been indicted. I have not, but I've seen people that have, and people that have pled guilty to things like larceny. You can watch it on TV. Just turn on your local news. There's all sorts of people that are being taken to jail. I have never heard of anybody being able to plead guilty in secret to something this monumentous. It's beyond the pale. It's beyond comprehension. So anyway, the senior banker from a British bank, and they won't even tell you the British bank, has admitted to conspiracy. He's admitted to the The conspiracy to defraud people over Libor manipulation. The banker is the first person in Britain to plead guilty to the offense. The person cannot be named for legal reasons, the senior fraud office said in a statement. Legal reasons? Yeah, I bet. You know, if it's a Goldman Sachs employee, that could put a lot of international pressure on these government officials, and it could definitely affect the economy. And in a world where basically the tyranny of the day is to protect you from everything, it makes sense that they would protect you from the identity so that you would not know who this person is. And if you have lost your house in the last few years because of the inability to pay for it or some scam that you got conned into, it's got to be really infuriating. There's so many people that have been targets and have been exploited, not only by the government, by the banks that are empowered and are kept secret. Their crimes have been and conspiracies have been kept secret from the public to shield them, not you. It's not for public concern. They're not concerned about how it's going to make you feel. They're not concerned about you finding out it's Goldman Sachs or Citibank or some other company and that you're going to freak out. The only thing that would be affected is profits for those people that have invested in the system, in the Citigroup, in whatever bank it is. So many of them are involved. Who knows? Who knows who's involved? Because they're not telling you. The only thing that you could tell from this is that the government, yes, the government is shielding the real criminals from the people. So there you go. I do want to talk about Ebola, something that a lot of people want to be shielded from. Some people, some of you out there want the government to do more. The government's not doing enough. And there's some of you that are, like me, pretty skeptical. We're talking about an outbreak, this huge outbreak, and we have one person that has died from it in the United States of America. Allegedly, I don't know, it's not airborne, but if somebody coughs in your face and you have some kind of aerosolized content coming out of your mouth or whatever, I mean, that's kind of airborne to me. That I guess it's just how airborne and how contagious it may be. But the Ebola scare has brought everyone under scrutiny. And the one group that is there to always help is the IMF. The IMF has lots of money, millions, maybe even billions of dollars that they're going to lend to these developing nations in Africa that have been besieged by the Ebola. And the U.S. government has now boots on the ground fighting Ebola. I've been watching the DOD Pentagon channel that we get here from Fort Hood. I live in North Austin, basically, Texas, and we're about, an hour's distance here from Fort Hood. And it's always interesting to watch, what they're doing with these triage centers and, what they're paying for, which is going to be just for a temporary crisis. I mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast to bring it back full circle. This is just something that is going to be a huge money boondoggle. And at the end of the day, they're going to have a bunch of duct tape. They're going to have a bunch of plastic. They're going to have a bunch of, rain slickers and masks that aren't going to do much for the economy and probably at the end of the day are not going to protect the people from this outbreak. How bad the epidemic will become and what the government's role should be is really my bigger question. I mean, in this day and age, what should and can the government do to protect me? And I would say for most of you out there listening that want the government to be able to have more quarantining powers, that want the government to shut down flights, just be careful how much power you want the government to have at a moment's notice. Obama has signed an executive order that's really just a continuation of other executive orders. 13295, the detention of Americans with respiratory illnesses. And it's interesting to note, Natural Society has this. and asked this question, rather: is America headed for a widespread involuntary incarceration due to Ebola warfare? I don't know. Could be. Depends on what airport you're in whenever you get quarantined in the lockdown. And it's one of the things I was talking about with my wife, and she's like, why doesn't the government just shut down these airlines? I mean, it just seems stupid, the response. And I agree. We can all agree that the response has been stupid. But, what people don't think about, and I didn't think about until it was brought up really, was that if you're just happen to be one of these people that has, unfortunately landed yourself on the quarantine plane, now you're in a quarantine with other people that may have Ebola. Now, is it the government's fault for giving you the Ebola? I think so. I just see the piles of lawsuits that are going to come out of this and what it's ultimately going to be, which is a medical tyranny. What is being blamed is, as I mentioned, racism. This guy had 103 fever. The now deceased Mr. Duncan, the Liberian who came back under false pretenses, knowing that he had Ebola, to get medical treatment. Some people would say that's very smart. I would say, well, it's somewhat smart. I mean, it's smarter than, what he could have done, which is just maybe die on the street. But at the end of the day, they didn't save him. They were unable to save him. And some of you disgusting tragedy pimps like Reverend Jesse Jackson have mentioned or put out there that it's because, he's black. He didn't get the secret syrup. He didn't get the secret sauce that some of the white, more prominent people may get. There might be some truth to that. I don't know. But, I mean, even rumors now that the CDC is grabbing some of these alleged Ebola victims and blackbagging them and taking them. I've seen at least 3 reports this morning of that. What's happening to these people that are alleged Ebola holders, or people that are now infected with Ebola? They just kind of go missing. And I just start thinking, wow, my conspiratorial mind starts reeling here and thinking about, is there a secret lab at Fort Detrick where they're taking all of these people and, sucking blood out of them and putting them to some kind of hyperbaric chamber so they can keep the Ebola alive to try to create and test drugs on these people? I mean, we know the high amount of contagion and people that should have Ebola, if it's as contagious as they have said it is to be. I mean, we're not seeing those, and these victims just kind of go away. They're like, oh no, I don't have the Ebola. Where'd that person go? So, is there's a high amount of people that would be candidates for such testing already. And is that happening, on some island of Dr. Moreau or right here in the homeland? I wonder about it. And just how long is it going to be before the Ebola vaccine's here and they're selling it to you and maybe, forcing people into some kind of quarantine, or now having that apparatus. Every time they say the government's not doing enough, the government's not doing everything they could and everything they should, first thing I think is, oh man, what kind of new powers to basically arbitrarily grab you do they have? People get upset about NDAA, the government's ability to grab you for whatever reason, very subjectively, and take your constitutional rights away from you. Well, now with this executive order, basically, this means that any police officer or quote-unquote health official can, without question, on suspicion alone, quarantine someone simply for showing any sign of respiratory illness. So, I mean, if you're in an airport and you just happen to have the flu, garden variety, regular flu, and, you have a temperature, you go through the, whatever, the rigmarole, the new screening process. That's what I'm thinking of. Go through this new screening process, probably with one of the TSA agents that's one of those failed behavioral detection people from that big scam, spending millions of dollars teaching them to look out for different face wrinkles of terrorists and other mannerisms of people that have bad intentions and now they can be just as successful and probably even less effective in trying to figure out if you really have Ebola. And if you do, what are they going to do? They're just going to grab you and take you to some room. I hear the man in the background, my screaming. I think he's found me over here on the side of the house. Anyway, that's my young infant son back there. Well, he's about 8 months old. I hear him crawling and banging on the door. That's okay. At least I know that he loves me and he hears my voice, so he knows I'm here. Anyway, the executive order, read it for yourself. I've got a link up there from Natural Society on blacklistednews.com to it. And it's so subjective. It is very easy to use that as a catch-all for taking your rights away from you and imprisoning you indefinitely. I mean, there's no limitation. If the government calls you a terrorist, there's a limitation. There's a 90-day limitation where they have to come up with some charges. They got to figure out why you're a terrorist. They've got to put forward something. Not that they will, and not that they have. And there's a few examples of where the government has held people longer than 90 days. Just because there's laws and rules in place, let's not confuse the fact that the government doesn't have to follow those, and you do. But I mean, this is worse. There is no timeline. There is no limitation. There's really no legal precedent or even medical precedent for your capture and detainment. So, I mean, this is a medical tyranny that's beyond even what we have today for terrorism. And I think it's a perfect example of where, we miss the point. It's the fact that you suspend, because of something that's even an Ebola outbreak, something that's as scary as that may be, that we're willing to forgo our constitutional rights and to allow the government to have extraordinary powers over us and over others. And people are calling for it. They want that to happen. So that's my thoughts on Ebola, where it goes from here, how many people will be infected. I tell you this, we have one person that's dead, maybe another dozen suspected Ebola patients in the U.S. Some of these other stories that kind of come and go. Other ones, there's another one that was supposedly in Dallas, and they've had some manhunts, one in Atlanta. So maybe let's just go very, very liberally and say there's 20 suspected cases in the U.S. They're already using the term outbreak. It's an outbreak. 20 people that have anything I wouldn't quite consider to be an outbreak. But they're doing this to justify this clampdown or potential clampdown, the need to have the power. And that's where everyone, I mean, if you turn on the TV, I've been watching PBS NewsHour, and that's where you can get every Council on Foreign Relations big thinker and wonk on in one place. And the message is clear that there has to be some kind of legal precedent. They have to have a framework. We're not doing what we could. We need to do more. When they start saying we need to do more, you know where that goes. I wanted to mention this German journalist that hasn't got a lot of mainstream attention. I wonder why. Who has admitted that he wrote articles for the CIA. Don't dismiss it because he's done interviews on RT. We've linked up to one that's pretty good. He really explains how this subtle system works, where the CIA doesn't necessarily infiltrate, an actual operator on the ground, but rather that people are kind of ingratiated. They're brought into different parties and are invited to different business meetings and other elite gatherings, and at some point end up doing favors for not people that are necessarily CIA, but they are people that that work for CIA organizations or other front companies. And so his name is Dr. Udo. I'm sure I'm pronouncing this horribly. It's Ulfkott, Ulfkotte. I'm not going to play the audio here, but basically he admitted to writing articles about Gaddafi for the CIA, and he explained how reporters refused to cooperate. If they did, they were fired, they were ostracized, Blacklisted. And basically, this is an extension of Operation Mockingbird, and how the press was told directly what to write. And if they did not, then they would basically be outliers and would find themselves in a very bad way. We can expand that to real journalists like Gary Webb that have been assassinated by the CIA because of their writing in the expose of how the CIA was funding the Contras in South America during the late 90s and or early 90s, late 80s to fund all of those Nicaraguan revolutionaries. Gary Webb is going to be remembered because they're actually making a movie about his life and Dark Alliance and what a lot of people ask is why he was killed. And of course, it's still, if you go to his wiki, the official reason for death was suicide. But if you look at some of the pictures, I mean, it's quite obvious. You don't beat yourself into suicide. Not usually. There's another case where there's two very prominent, one of David Ray Griffin's proteges and other contributors that worked with him on 9/11, who just recently killed himself and his wife in a dual suicide, mutual suicide. Very strange, very strange. And you had Michael Rupert just this year committing suicide. So, beyond just being fired, beyond just being pushed to almost, relegated to obscurity, there are people that have been killed for bringing truth to the masses. So if real people and powerful people inside of these different media organizations publishers decide to go forward with stories, I mean, it's hugely damaging to the CIA. And if it's damaging enough, I mean, if we looked at the crack epidemic in South Los Angeles during the 90s, and you can pretty much wholeheartedly place that on the U.S. government, on the CIA, to fund covert operations knowingly during this is actually all the way back to the Reagan administration, but how it became so prevalent during that time. And it's because of the CIA smuggling cocaine in and creating this epidemic. So racism, all of the things that really smack of that whole operation, the targeting of the poor, the black, inner city to be basically to addict them and to bring a domestic police state, a need for these warrior cops, and to fund warrior vigilantes in Nicaragua it's just stunning stuff. So, a lot of people might balk at this German journalist, but it's not really a conspiratorial subject. I mean, other than the fact that this is conspiring, this is domestic propaganda, this is illegal. It's, I would say, on a lot of levels, treason. It's defrauding the people. I mean, you think about this: you defraud somebody for $5, you can go to jail. If you defraud people into a war, into funneling billions of dollars into arming other nations under false pretenses, I mean, it's beyond the pale. It's just the worst thing that you can imagine. There's nothing more sinister that has worse consequences, that have more victims, that have more of a global impact than those kind of things. And those are usually not ones that will land you in jail if you're that powerful. So with that being said, I don't know where we're at today. I feel kind of disempowered and a little perturbed, but I think that the good takeaway from all of this is that people are seeing through it, and we have to be vigilant in getting people to understand why it is that we should not ask for more government tyranny, more powers, unchallenged, unscrutinized powers for the state, and to really take back our own health, our own safety. There's a lot of things that you can do to prevent Ebola, like sticking your face in Ebola patients' mouths and washing your hands. There's a lot of great ways that you can empower your own self to not have to, and things that you should think about when you're making that domestic trip. And, I know that a lot of these things just kind of, worry. They're more worrisome than anything else. But I think when we constantly challenge and bring these discussions to bear, more and more people are going to not only reject the state and reject the mainstream media's narratives, but more and more people are going to look to themselves for solutions. And that's what I do. I mean, that's ultimately where you find yourself once you realize that you can't trust the government. They're not out there trying to protect you. They are not working in the public's trust. They're just a big barker economy that want to scam you out of dollar bills and your time, your effort. Thank you so much for supporting this show, all of you out there. It's brought to you by you, commercial-free, each and every week. Well, at some point, we're going to do the Doomcast with Charlie McGrath, number 63, I think it is, or 62. We'll figure it out. All right, guys, have a great weekend. Until next time, take care.